Commander Mason Riker had faced impossible odds before, but nothing like this. The cold hum of the Threx warship's hold was a stark contrast to the scorching world outside. He lay strapped to a rigid medical slab, the buzzing of alien machinery echoing overhead. His body ached, the result of harsh sedation and the bruises from capture. Yet Mason's mind remained razor-sharp. His military training refused to let him slip into despair. The Threx Dominion wanted him dead. Or worse, they wanted him to vanish into a legend of failure. When the ship's hold doors screeched open, Mason's enhanced vision adjusted to the blinding glare of Velgarith 9's twin suns. The air was thick with sulfur and ash, swirling around jagged black rocks that jutted like the spines of some ancient beast. The executioner's words hissed in his implant comms, translated from guttural Threx dialect. "You are to perish on this world, a place where no living thing survives save the dragons. Let your death warn your kind." Mason's jaw tightened. The Threx had sent him to the graveyard of warriors. They didn't know him. His boots hit the scorching ground with a crunch. Velgarith 9 was hell incarnate. Volcanic fissures bubbled nearby, sending tongues of flame licking the cracked earth. Storm clouds brewed overhead, swirling with radioactive particles that danced like embers in the toxic wind. The sky was a dull red, broken only by the sharp silhouettes of floating rock islands that drifted silently above the wasteland. And somewhere in this nightmare, the dragons waited. Mason's military implant provided a schematic of the local fauna. The Dracari, towering winged predators with obsidian scales that shimmered like molten glass. Their jaws could crush steel. Their plasma breath could melt armor. The thought alone made his throat dry. He activated his stealth camo. The device cloaked his presence, but only briefly. The Threx had stripped his weapons down to nothing but a survival knife and a few energy packs. The moment the ship left orbit, he was alone. Movement caught his eye. A shadow flickered across the molten river below. Mason froze. From the sky, a massive shape descended, the unmistakable outline of a Dracari swooping down like death incarnate. Its wings spread wide, blocking out the harsh sun. Razor-sharp claws aimed straight for him. He rolled behind a boulder, heart hammering. The beast's screech echoed, a sound so primal it rattled his bones. Flames licked the air where it had passed. This was no mere predator. This was a living nightmare. Mason's fingers brushed the survival knife, but he knew the fight was hopeless. He had to run. He sprinted, adrenaline fueling his legs, dodging pools of acid and leaping over sharp obsidian shards. The Dracari circled above, hunting. It hunted a man. Exhaustion clawed at him, but giving up was not an option. Ahead, ancient ruins rose from the ash, a shattered fortress of alien origin, its walls covered in faded glyphs that pulsed faintly in the low light. Mason scrambled inside, ducking behind crumbled pillars. The dragon's roar shook the stone. It landed at the ruin's entrance, claws tearing at the ground. Mason's breath came in ragged gasps. The beast's eyes scanned, glowing like molten coals. And then, it hesitated. For a moment, the Dracari cocked its head, as if sensing something unfamiliar in Mason's aura. As night fell, the temperature plummeted, but Mason's stealth camo had failed. Too much movement, too much heat. The dragon waited outside, its silhouette barely visible against the dying light. Alone in the dark, Mason's mind raced. The ruins offered little protection, but they might hold secrets. Ancient weapons, technology, anything to tip the scales. He touched the alien glyphs on the walls. Strange energy pulsed beneath his fingertips. Suddenly, a low rumble vibrated through the ground. Mason's eyes snapped to the horizon. A massive shape stirred from the volcanic pits, the unmistakable form of a colossal Dracari matriarch, awakening from a long slumber. This was no longer just a test of survival. This was a fight for dominance. Mason whispered to himself, voice dry as ash. They sent me here to die, but they don't know what I am. The Drakari Queen's roar shattered the silence, echoing like thunder across the wasteland. The game had begun. Mason's breath came in short bursts, but his eyes never stopped scanning. The ruins that sheltered him were ancient, but more than just stone. Alien architecture twisted and spiraled, half swallowed by volcanic ash and creeping vines that glowed faintly with bioluminescence. The glyphs, mysterious and indecipherable, pulsed like the heartbeat of some long-forgotten intelligence. He moved cautiously through the labyrinth, each step kicking up ash that sparkled like tiny stars in the fading light. His enhanced senses were on high alert. Somewhere beyond the broken walls, the great Drakari Queen roamed, a living volcano of rage and fury. Her roar had shaken the very bones of Velgarith 9, a reminder that this was her kingdom. Mason's mission was clear in his mind, even if the orders had been twisted by fate. Survive, then find a way off this hellscape. But first, he had to understand the land of fire and wings. Hours passed like days. Mason discovered small signs of life, lizards the size of wolves, strange birds with metallic feathers, and insects that glimmered like living jewels. Each was a piece of Velgarith's brutal ecosystem. Survival meant knowing them all. Then came the Drakari. He spotted a juvenile, smaller than the queen, but still monstrous. It perched atop a jagged cliff, eyes glowing orange as it surveyed the land. The creature's scales shimmered with a spectrum of colors that defied logic, like liquid metal flowing beneath its skin. Mason's heart pounded. The juvenile Drakari was both beautiful and terrifying, an apex predator in its own right. It flexed its wings, stirring the acrid air, preparing to strike. There was no escape. Adrenaline surged. Mason dove behind a rock just as the beast lunged, claws raking the ground inches from his face. The heat of its plasma breath scorched the air where he'd stood moments before. He pulled his survival knife, a simple but reliable weapon, and slashed at the creature's wing. The Drakari screeched, surprised and wounded. Mason scrambled to his feet, eyes scanning for an opening. In that moment, something inside him snapped. The fight wasn't just for life, it was for dominance. He grabbed a shard of volcanic glass and hurled it with all his might. It struck the Drakari's eye. The beast recoiled, disoriented. Mason didn't hesitate. Using everything he'd learned in years of combat training, he launched himself at the Drakari, striking its exposed flank with brutal precision. The beast thrashed, but Mason's grip was relentless. Finally, the juvenile crumpled, its massive body hitting the ground with a thunderous crash. Silence followed. The victory was hollow. Other Drakari had heard the battle. From the sky and the shadows, eyes began to focus on Mason, a human who dared challenge their world. He was no longer invisible. He was marked. Exhausted but alert, Mason dragged himself to higher ground. Below, the volcanic plains shimmered with eerie heat. He spotted ancient ruins, their spires reaching into the smoky sky like skeletal fingers. Somewhere inside those ruins lay the key, if he could survive long enough to find it. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the earth beneath him. Dust and ash cascaded from the cliffs. Mason's instincts screamed. Something massive was coming. From the glowing cracks of a nearby volcano, the colossal Drakari Queen emerged. She was a living storm, scales gleaming like obsidian glass, eyes burning with molten fury, and wings that blotted out the sky. Her roar shattered the silence, echoing through the ruins like a death knell. Mason knew he was no match for her brute strength or plasma breath. But he wasn't just a soldier. He was a survivor, a thinker. He ducked into a narrow tunnel beneath the ruins, where the queen's massive form couldn't follow. The tunnels twisted and turned, ancient tech humming faintly in the walls, remnants of a lost civilization that once tamed these beasts. As Mason moved deeper, he realized the ruins weren't just shelter. They were a battlefield of a forgotten war. Strange weapons lay dormant, and glyphs hinted at a power beyond comprehension. For the first time, hope stirred in his chest. Outside, the queen paced, sensing the intruder. She snarled, claws scraping the stone. Inside, Mason's hand brushed a console covered in dust. He wiped the grime away, revealing symbols that pulsed under his touch. The console flickered to life, casting eerie blue light across the chamber. Lines of alien script scrolled across the screen. Mason's mind raced. If he could decipher this technology, maybe he could turn the dragon's world against them. A sudden shudder ran through the ruins. A warning. The queen was breaking in. The massive doors began to crack under her claws. Mason gripped his knife tighter. He wasn't just trapped anymore. He was in a war zone. The heavy stone doors groaned under the relentless pressure of the Drakari Queen's claws. Mason Riker's breath echoed in the narrow chamber, cold sweat slicking his brow despite the planet's searing heat outside. The pulsing blue light of the alien console flickered unevenly, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters across the walls. The queen was coming. He could hear her ragged breath through the fractured stones, the rumble of her immense body just beyond the threshold. Her eyes, bright, molten, filled with primal fury, searched for him. To her, he was an intruder, a weakness to be crushed. But Mason wasn't ready to become prey. His fingers brushed over the console's interface, deciphering fragments of the alien language. The glyphs revealed an ancient weapon cache hidden deep beneath the ruins, high-energy blades, plasma spears, and traps designed to subdue even the fiercest predators. If he could reach them, he might stand a chance. The doors shattered, sending shards of stone flying like deadly hail. The queen's massive claw swiped inside, narrowly missing Mason's head. He dove aside, sliding through the opening into a sprawling cavern filled with the detritus of a long-forgotten war. Bones, shattered machinery, and broken weapons littered the floor. The cavern's walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescent fungi, illuminating a path deeper into the labyrinth. Mason sprinted, the queen's guttural growls close behind. Suddenly, the path opened into a vast chamber where ancient weapons rested in crystalline vaults. Mason grabbed a plasma blade, feeling its humming energy course through his veins. The weapon was light and deadly, a perfect extension of his will. He turned, heart pounding, just as the queen burst into the room. Her obsidian scales shimmered in the eerie light, and her breath ignited the air with molten plasma. Mason dodged the blast, feeling the heat singe his armor. It was fight or die. With a roar, Mason lunged forward, plasma blade raised. The queen's claws met his strike, sparks flying as steel and scale collided. Each clash shook the chamber, echoing like thunder. Mason fought with every ounce of training, every shred of instinct. He dodged, parried, and struck back with ferocity no alien predator had expected from a human. The queen faltered. A flash of pain, a tear in her wing. Blood darkened the cavern floor. The queen's massive body trembled as Mason pressed his advantage. With a final, desperate strike, he plunged the plasma blade deep into her flank. She let out a scream, a primal sound that reverberated through the ruins. Then she collapsed. Silence. Mason stood over the fallen queen, chest heaving, eyes wide. He had done the impossible. He had killed a Drakari. The weight of what he'd done settled like a storm. Around him, other Drakari watched from the shadows, their glowing eyes fixed on the human who dared challenge their might. A low rumble of acknowledgement passed through the chamber, an unspoken recognition of Mason's new status. He was no longer just a survivor. He was a contender. But victory came with a price. Mason knew the Threk's dominion would send reinforcements. News of the queen's death would ripple through their ranks like wildfire. He had only hours, maybe minutes, before the world of Velgarith 9 would erupt into chaos. He needed allies. As Mason prepared to leave the chamber, he noticed something near the queen's massive form, an enormous egg, half buried in ash and molten rock. His mind raced. The queen's hair. Could he raise this creature? Could he turn the enemy's legacy into his own? Outside, the sky burned crimson with the twin suns setting beyond the jagged horizon. Mason stood atop the ruins, looking out over a world that had become his prison and his battlefield. He was alone, hunted, and surrounded by monsters, but he was still breathing. And now he was a predator. The colossal Drakari Queen was dead, but her legacy lingered in the heavy air of Velgorith 9. Mason Riker crouched beside the massive egg, his fingers tracing the jagged patterns etched on its surface, a delicate shell almost glowing with a faint internal warmth. The fading light of the twin suns cast long shadows across the volcanic plains, the sky darkening with ash and embers swirling like ghostly dancers. For the first time since his exile, Mason felt a flicker of hope. He carefully moved the egg to the ruined shelter, cradling it in a makeshift nest fashioned from shards of obsidian and scorched foliage. The young dragon inside was the key, not only to survival but to dominance on this merciless world. But Velgorith 9 was unforgiving. The ground trembled beneath him as a deep rumble echoed through the ruins. Mason's enhanced vision tracked a massive silhouette emerging from the ash, a Drakari matriarch, larger and more fearsome than the fallen queen, her scales darker and eyes burning with ancient fury. Her roar shattered the air, a challenge and a warning. Mason rose to meet her. The matriarch's claws gouged the earth where he stood, sending sparks flying. Her breath ignited the air, a wave of superheated plasma aimed straight at him. Mason dove behind a pillar, feeling the scorching heat singe his armor. He knew he couldn't defeat her through sheer force. This battle required cunning. He reached into his pack, pulling out a Threx biotech grenade, an experimental device designed to emit disorienting neural pulses. With a steady hand, Mason lobbed the grenade near the matriarch's feet. It detonated with a low hum, releasing a shockwave of violet energy. The Drakari staggered, her senses scrambled. Seizing the moment, Mason sprinted forward, slashing at her exposed flank with his plasma blade. The matriarch howled, thrashing violently, but something in her eyes changed. The primal rage faded, replaced by wary curiosity. Mason lowered his weapon slightly, speaking aloud in a steady voice. "You're not just a beast. Neither am I." The matriarch cocked her head, studying him with an intelligence that defied her monstrous form. She sniffed the air, nostrils flaring. Slowly, she stepped back, her massive tail curling around her legs. The silence was thick, charged with tension and possibility. Days passed in uneasy truce. Mason tended to the egg, protecting it from scavengers and the harsh environment. The matriarch kept her distance but watched him, her presence both a threat and a shield. Gradually, Mason noticed subtle changes, signs of recognition in the matriarch's behavior. She accepted his scent, allowed him near her hunting grounds, and even brought him gifts, shards of rare minerals and fresh kills. Their relationship was fragile but growing, a dance between predator and survivor. One night, under the eerie glow of Velgorith 9's twin moons, the egg trembled. Mason's heart pounded as a crack appeared along its surface. With a wet crack and a final shudder, a hatchling emerged, a Drakari no larger than a wolf, scales shimmering with molten silver. Its amber eyes locked onto Mason's, and it let out a tentative chirp. The bond was instantaneous. Mason reached out, and the hatchling nuzzled his hand, emitting a low purr that vibrated through the ruins. The matriarch approached, lowering her massive head to sniff the newborn. She regarded Mason with something close to respect. He had passed the trial. But survival on Velgorith 9 was only the beginning. Mason understood the deeper game now. This planet was not just a prison, but a crucible designed to forge predators. The biotech within him was evolving, sharpening his senses, his reflexes, even his mind. The hatchling grew rapidly, its strength and intelligence surpassing even Mason's expectations. Together, they would challenge the Drakari hierarchy. Together, they would rise. From the shadows, a distant rumble stirred. A new threat approaching. The Threx dominion was not finished, and Velgarith 9 still held secrets darker than any dragon's breath. Mason tightened his grip on his plasma blade, eyes steely. The war for survival had become a war for dominion. And the apex predator was ready. The hatchling Drakari had grown fast, too fast. Where most creatures took years to mature, this young predator was already a towering beast, its molten silver scales gleaming with lethal promise. Mason Riker stood at the edge of the volcanic ridge, watching the creature stretch its powerful wings against the blood-red sky. Velgarith 9 was no longer just a death trap. It was becoming a kingdom, his kingdom. In the weeks since the hatchling's birth, Mason's relationship with the dragons had transformed. The matriarch, once a looming threat, now moved alongside him as an uneasy ally. The local Drakari clans whispered in awe and fear about the human who had slain their queen and now commanded a new generation of dragons. Mason had harnessed more than survival skills. He'd forged influence. From scavenged shards of ancient tech, he crafted weapons of bone and obsidian, enhanced with alien energy cores. His plasma blade had become a symbol of terror among the Drakari, cutting through scales and sinew alike. But more importantly, he learned to speak their language, not in words, but in dominance, gesture, and raw will. One night, beneath the eerie glow of Velgarith 9's twin moons, Mason gathered the leaders of the Drakari clans. Their wings folded, eyes glowing like molten gold, their bodies taut with suspicion. Mason stepped forward, voice steady and commanding. "The Threx dominion sent me here to die. But I live. I have killed your queen and raised her heir. Together, we will be stronger. We will not be hunted. We will hunt." The clans murmured, a ripple of unrest. The Drakari had never been united. Fierce rivals and predators, their power was splintered by pride and blood feuds. But Mason's vision was clear. A united Drakari empire under his leadership, one that could challenge the Dominion itself. The eldest Drakari, a scared warrior named Varkol, stepped forward. His voice was a rumble, deep and unforgiving. "You speak of unity, human, but we are dragons. We do not bow to flesh and bone." Mason met his gaze, unflinching. "Not bow. Lead. I have the strength of a human mind and the blood of a predator. I will fight alongside you, not above you. But if we stay divided, we all die." The tension hung thick. Then, slowly, Varkol lowered his head, a sign of grudging respect. With the clans aligned, at least for now, Mason turned his gaze to the wider war. The Threx dominion would not ignore the loss of their queen. Reports had already reached him of a scout ship shadowing the planet's orbit, a signal that reinforcements were coming. Mason had no illusions. The coming battle would be hell. He prepared his forces. The hatchling, now a fierce young Drakari named Kale, flew circles overhead, a living storm of wings and teeth. The clans sharpened their claws and sharpened their loyalty to the human who had become their apex predator. The first clash came swift and brutal. Threx dropships descended through the toxic clouds, unleashing squads of heavily armed soldiers. Plasma bolts scorched the air, meeting the fiery breath of Drakari in a blaze of chaos. Mason fought at the front lines, plasma blades slicing through armor, Kale roaring above as his flames turned the battlefield to ash. Despite their technological advantage, the Threx were unprepared for the fury of a united Drakari force, led by a human who understood their savage tactics. Victory was hard-won. The Threx were pushed back, their ships forced to retreat to orbit. But Velgarith 9 itself groaned with volcanic fury, the planet's fires stirred by the conflict. Mason stood atop a scorched ridge, Kale resting at his side, the clans gathering beneath them. He raised his blade to the sky. "This is our world now. Our dominion rises." Yet even in triumph, Mason's mind churned. The Threx would not surrender. They would return with weapons old and terrible, secrets buried beneath the stars. And Mason, he was no longer just a survivor. He was a king in a world of dragons. Victory tasted bitter. Velgareth IX's scorched plains were littered with the shattered bodies of Threx soldiers and Drakari alike. The air hung heavy with smoke and the metallic scent of blood. Mason Riker stood among the ruins of a battlefield, his plasma blade dull from relentless combat, his body bruised but unbroken. Around him, the Drakari clans gathered silently, their glowing eyes reflecting the dying embers of the fires they had set. Kale, now nearly the size of a great beast, nuzzled Mason's side, a fierce companion bonded through blood and flame. Yet Mason's mind was far from peace. The Threx retreat was a temporary reprieve, a shadow before the storm. Weeks after the battle, strange tremors began beneath Velgareth IX's crust. The planet itself seemed to shift, ancient machinery buried deep beneath the volcanic ash awakening from a long slumber. Mason's scouts reported unnatural energy signatures pulsing from the core, signals that did not belong to any living creature. The ruins whispered secrets, and Mason was determined to unravel them. He returned to the chamber where he had first awoken the power of the alien console. This time, he was not alone. The Drakari matriarch, now an uneasy ally named Vesha, followed silently, her scaled face unreadable. Together, they delved deeper into the underground labyrinth, past corridors glowing with bioluminescent moss and halls lined with alien script. Mason's fingers brushed over panels that hummed with latent energy. Then, a voice, a cold, mechanical voice, echoed through the chamber, translated by his implant. Intruder detected. Activating defense protocols. Suddenly, the walls shifted. Ancient sentinels, towering constructs of metal and crystal, awoke from their millennia-long slumber. Their eyes blazed with blue light, weapons forming from their limbs. Mason's heart raced. The Threx had long ago hidden this technology beneath the planet's surface, a last line of defense, and perhaps a weapon of untold power. The Sentinels advanced. Mason and Vesha fought side by side, plasma blade and claw flashing in a deadly dance. The Sentinels' attacks were relentless, their targeting systems precise beyond any biological foe. But Mason was no ordinary human. His biotech enhancements surge, reflexes sharpening, senses heightening. Kal's roar echoed from above as the young Drakari dove, raking the Sentinels with fiery breath. Still, the machines adapted, coordinating their strikes. In the heart of the chamber, Mason spotted a control nexus, a pulsating core of alien energy that seemed to command the Sentinels. He knew destroying it would shut down the defense network. Dodging blasts of energy, Mason sprinted toward the core, Vesha covering his flank. The Sentinels converged, their weapons locking on. With a desperate leap, Mason plunged his plasma blade into the core. A blinding light filled the chamber. The Sentinels froze, then collapsed into inert heaps of metal and crystal. Breathing heavily, Mason stared at the ruined core. The ancient technology was silent. For now. But the planet's secrets had deeper layers, and the Threx's true plan was yet to be revealed. Back on the surface, Mason addressed the Drakari clans. His voice was resolute, tempered by the weight of what they faced. Velgareth IX is more than a battleground. It's a fortress and a weapon. The Threx Dominion sent me here to die, but they underestimated the strength of a human and a dragon united. We've survived the fire, but shadows are stirring. The clans listened, their fierce loyalty tested but growing. Kale stood by Mason's side, wings spread wide, a symbol of their rising dominion. As night fell, Mason gazed at the distant stars. In the cold void beyond Velgareth IX, Threx warships gathered, silent and waiting. The war for the planet was far from over, but Mason Riker was ready to face whatever came next, because he had become more than a survivor. He was the apex predator. Velgareth IX's skies burned with a crimson dawn as Mason Riker stood atop the jagged ridge overlooking the sprawling volcanic plains. Below, the Drakari clans had rallied, their wings beating a thunderous war rhythm, filling the air with the electric scent of fire and blood. Beside Mason, Kal, the silver-scaled Dracari he had raised, spread his vast wings, shadowing the earth like a storm about to break. The Threx dominion was coming back, this time with a vengeance. Reports from scouts in the upper atmosphere warned of a massive fleet descending. These were no mere scouts or light assault ships. The Threx had sent their heavy cruisers, war machines bristling with plasma cannons and missile racks. Their mission was clear: reclaim Velgarith 9 and annihilate the human who had defied their will. Mason felt the weight of every life on this planet. The Dracari clans, his own allies, and the young hatchling dragons still too fragile for war. The future of this brutal world depended on what they did next. At the command center carved from obsidian and alien steel, Mason gathered the Dracari leaders once more. The matriarch Vesha stood beside him, her eyes blazing with a fierce intensity born from countless battles. "We face an enemy who will stop at nothing," Mason said, voice steady despite the tension. "But we have fire, fury, and the fury of dragons. We will defend Velgarith 9, not just as survivors, but as rulers." Varkal, the scared warrior, growled in agreement. "The Dominion fights with machines. We fight with blood and flame. They will learn the price of underestimating dragons and humans." The first wave hit at dawn. Threx warships tore through the thick volcanic clouds, releasing armored dropships that rained soldiers onto the planet's surface. Plasma fire lit the sky, colliding with the dragon's fiery breath in a storm of heat and destruction. Mason fought alongside Kale, their bond seamless as they struck down enemy squads. The plasma blade in Mason's hand cut through power armor like paper. Kel's flames engulfed entire squads, leaving nothing but ash. But the Threx adapted quickly. Heavy artillery unleashed barrages that devastated Dracari nesting grounds. Drones swarmed, hunting the dragons from the skies. As the battle raged, Mason realized the fight was not only for survival, but for control of an ancient alien artifact buried deep within the volcanic core, the source of Velgarith 9's strange energy and the key to ultimate power. If the Threx seized it, the balance would tip forever. Mason ordered a small elite team, including Vesha and Varkal, to infiltrate the core's defenses and secure the artifact. The mission was suicide, but necessary. As the assault team disappeared into the underground tunnels, Mason and Kale led the surface defense. The sky roared with dragons and war machines locked in mortal combat. Deep beneath the surface, the tunnels twisted and pulsed with alien energy. Mason's team moved cautiously, fighting off automated sentinels reactivated by the Threx invasion. Vesha's claws tore through metal, Varkal's roar echoed off the walls, and Mason's plasma blade lit the darkness. They reached the artifact chamber, a vast hall glowing with ancient power. The artifact floated above a pedestal, a crystalline core humming with raw energy. Suddenly, the Threx commander appeared, a towering figure in enhanced armor, his eyes cold and calculating. "You're too late, human," he snarled. "The Dominion will claim Velgarith 9 and crush your rebellion." A fierce battle erupted. Mason's team fought desperately to protect the core, their weapons flashing in the dim light. Mason faced the commander head-on, their blades clashing in a storm of sparks and plasma. Above ground, the war reached a crescendo. Dragons and Threx soldiers fell in equal measure, the volcanic earth trembling beneath the fury. Finally, Mason's blade pierced the commander's armor. The warlord fell with a guttural scream, his soldiers retreating into the shadows. The artifact pulsed wildly, reacting to the battle's end. Mason grabbed it, feeling its power surge through him. A fusion of alien technology and Dracari fire. He turned to his allies, breath ragged but eyes blazing with triumph. "This is our world, our future." The battle for Velgarith 9 was far from over. But for now, the apex predator had claimed victory. The skies over Velgarith 9 burned with the glow of dawn, but this morning was different. Calm, heavy with the scent of ash and victory. Mason Riker stood atop the highest volcanic peak, the crystalline artifact pulsing faintly in his hands. Below him stretched the battered but unbroken forces of the Dracari clans, their wings folded, eyes fixed on the human who had become legend. Kale, now a towering silver behemoth, stood beside Mason, his low rumble a steady heartbeat beneath the distant thunder of the volcano. Mason's mind raced back through the brutal weeks, the battles, betrayals, sacrifices, the death of the Dracari queen, the birth of a new generation, the siege that nearly tore the planet apart. But through it all, he had endured. He had adapted. He had become more than human. He had become the apex predator. With the artifact secured, Mason understood its true power. It was a relic of an ancient race that had seeded the galaxy with worlds like Velgarith 9, planets forged as crucibles of evolution and war. The artifact was a key, a weapon, and a beacon all at once. With it, Mason could unlock technologies that would shift the balance of power far beyond this volcanic prison. But such power came with a cost. Mason felt it pulsing through his veins, intertwining with the biotech enhancements coursing inside him. The energy was intoxicating, sharpening his senses, accelerating his reflexes, even bending the very fabric of the alien world around him. Yet with power came responsibility. The Dracari looked to him not just as a leader, but as a symbol of hope, an answer to their endless blood feuds and domination by the Threx. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet. From the horizon, the remnants of the Threx fleet stirred, retreating but not defeated. The Dominion's war machines still threatened the galaxy, and Velgarith 9 was just the beginning. Mason raised the artifact high, its light blazing like a second sun. "We are not prey," he declared, voice echoing over the assembled clans. "We are hunters. We are rulers. And this world will be the forge where the future is born." Kale let out a mighty roar, wings unfurling to blot out the sun. The clans erupted into cheers, their fiery cries shaking the air. Mason allowed himself a brief smile. The apex predator had claimed his throne. But deep in the shadows of the planet's molten caves, a new threat stirred. Ancient sentinels and hidden weapons waiting for the next challenger. Mason knew the war was far from over. The galaxy beyond beckoned, filled with enemies who would test his strength, his cunning, and his humanity. He turned to Kale, placing a hand on the great dragon's scaled head. "Together, we rise. Together, we will conquer the stars." As the twin suns rose higher, bathing Velgarith 9 in light, Mason Riker, human, warrior, king, steeled himself for the battles to come. The apex predator was just beginning his hunt.